Intellectual disability, once known or called mental retardation, is characterized by below average intelligence or mental ability and lack of skills necessary for day to day living. People with intellectual disabilities can do and learn new skills, but they learn them more slowly. There are varying degrees of intellectual disability from mild to profound. Someone with intellectual disability has limitations in two areas. These areas are intellectual functioning, also known as IQ. This refers to a person's ability to learn, reason, make decisions, and solve problems. Adaptive behaviors. These are skills necessary for day to day life, such as being able to communicate effectively, interact with others, and take care of oneself. IQ. Intelligence quotient is measured by an IQ test. The average IQ is 100. A person is considered intellectually disabled if he or she has an IQ of less than 70 to 75. To measure a child's adaptive behaviors, a specialist will observe the child's skills and compare them to other children of the same age. Things that may be observed include how well the child can feed or dress himself or herself, how well the child is able to communicate with and understand others, and how the child interacts with family, friends, and other children of the same age. Intellectual disability is thought to affect about 1% of the population. Of those affected, 85% have mild intellectual disability. This means they are just a little slower than average to learn new information or skills. With the right support, most will be able to live independently as adults.
An intellectual disability is something, is a phrase that is, it might be new to some individual and to some people out there. It's just going to be a term or a phrase that may not be necessarily very familiar for many of you folks out there. But the bottom line is an intellectual disability, when you see that term, basically what you're going to be looking at is an individual who's it's a physiological thing to begin with. It's all about the central nervous system, the brain and all its different functions. There is something from infancy in many cases, but there are other avenues in which an individual can have an intellectual disability. But I'm going to start with the most basic form. It's basically somewhere in infancy. Very oftentimes it happens before an individual is born. There's something that is miswired or it doesn't work right in the development of the fetus, and then once the individual is born, the central nervous system doesn't seem to be wired correctly. And it manifests itself in deficiencies related to those human milestones, those typical developmental milestones, such as communication and social skills, and motor milestones that everybody needs to progress through in that stepwise progression. And what happens with an intellectual disability is that central nervous system miswiring has an impact, and it sort of stops the progression of that development, and the milestones are not necessarily hit in the right order, or they're not progressed enough to a certain age level. Intellectual disabilities have historically been known as different terms throughout the field of applied behavior analysis or psychology in general. Probably the most common phrase utilized to describe intellectual disability is mental retardation, and that has been used for decades. And I think we're approaching a better understanding of what this problem entails, and therefore we've come up with, or the field has come up with, a different term, and it's intellectual disability. And basically what you're looking at is an individual that is demonstrating those deficits, the deficits related to social skills, deficits related to the ability to interact with others in an adaptive manner, those communication skills, the ability to tolerate changes in their environment, their ability to learn things. So what happens with intellectual disabilities is that there's this kind of like a wall that an individual cognitively bumps up against at some point in time during their development. So when we're starting to learn more and more abstract cognitive concepts such as math and language and the rules associated with grammar and all those things that require abstract cognitive thinking, individuals with intellectual disabilities are going to hit that wall, and they're not going to be able to progress any further unless they have specialized interventions. And that's where applied behavior analysis comes in, because we can take an individual that has that wall, and we can take that wall and move it further along the line.
Challenges these individuals face. A person with an intellectual disability may have difficulty learning and managing daily living skills. Around 2 to 3% of Australians have an intellectual disability. Intellectual disability affects some people more than others. Of the approximately 500,000 Australians who have an intellectual disability, most, approximately 85%, have a mild intellectual disability, and many never seek or receive disability services. Having an intellectual disability means that the person finds it more difficult to learn and process new information and to manage the complex tasks required for everyday living.